Hello and welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. Today we want to talk about iscsi on QNAP and perhaps some other systems. So iscsi stands for Internet Small Computer Systems Interface, and it is an IP-based networked storage protocol. It seems that iscsi is more often used in enterprise data centers than home labs and isn't often discussed, which is kind of a shame because I think it adds a lot of utility, as you're going to see. Unlike files-based storage that CIFS, Common Internet File System, NFS, which is the Linux network file system, and AFS, which is Apple file system, iscsi is block-based storage. iscsi drives are considerably faster than network file services like CIFS. iscsi drives appear on client systems like a hardware disk drive, allowing the creation of a partition table, partitions, and file systems. So how does iscsi work? Well, iscsi has a target, which is on a server, and an initiator, which is the client. iscsi devices appear much like local disks, except that they're network-based and use the SCSI protocol over IP to perform block-level access. We're going to configure an iscsi target on QNAP NAS. The process is similar on other devices. For example, I know that you can do iscsi targets also on Proxmox. So we will configure an iscsi initiator on Windows and an iscsi initiator on an Ubuntu desktop and connect to our targets on the QNAP NAS. So on the QNAP NAS, QNAP allows for the creation of an iscsi drive inside of a file or an iscsi drive on a dedicated LUN. Creating an iscsi drive on a LUN is higher performance, and that's what we're going to do in this exercise. So the QNAP iscsi and fiber channel application is what allows the creation of iscsi LUN targets. Early releases of QTS5 broke iscsi target discovery, so be sure to be at the latest version of QTS5 or be at QTS 4.2. So let's add the iscsi service to a QNAP NAS and create an iscsi target LUN. So first of all, you want to go into QNAP iscsi and fiber channel application. And if you're entering it for the first time, it's going to provide this question that says, the services are disabled, do you want to enable them? Click OK. And then, do you want to launch the quick configuration wizard? And the answer is yes, so click OK again. So this is providing a simple diagram of how iscsi looks, the NAS being the target where the LUN is based, and the initiator will see a hard disk that it maps from that LUN. So then we click Next. I end up putting in the name of my NAS because it helps self-document the IQN target better so that I understand what I'm connecting to from the client side. Then we click Next. On this screen, we have the option to enable CHAP authentication, a username and a password to connect to our iscsi target. I'm not going to do that on my network because I'm on a local area network and I control access to that network and I know what's on that network. If you are running a network that many people use, or if you're running a network at an office or even at an enterprise, you're going to want to enable CHAP authentication. Then we click Next. So we give it a summary for the iscsi target profile, and then we're going to click Apply. So next step in the wizard is specifying the target. So the target, in my case, is going to be storage pool 1. If you have more than one storage pool, go ahead and select it. And then you have an option for thick allocation, which means allocate all the blocks at once, or thin allocation, or thin provisioning, which means allocate the blocks as the storage requirement expands. And I'm going to do a thick allocation. So the next thing is we're going to have a summary, and it's going to ask for the LUN name. I'll go ahead and leave it as VMS Fog _ 0. You can name it anything you want. And another summary here, just basically confirming that I wanted a 2 terabyte LUN, and it's going to be on storage pool 1, and it's a block-based LUN for thick allocation. And then we click Finish. So the next thing you're going to do is, at that point, it will be back in the iSCSI target LUN. It'll say it's creating, and once it gets up to 100%, the next thing you'll see is it will say that is enabled. So it's a 2 terabyte LUN, 100% allocated, it's enabled. And there's our IQN up here in parentheses. Okay, next place we go is QNAP storage and snapshots. In QNAP storage and snapshots, before I did this operation, I had a main storage area where I have the majority of my files. I had another file system called QVR Pro. That's for the QNAP NVR that I use, software NVR. And finally, we have VMS Fog _ 0, which is our mapped LUN, and that is mapped to the iSCSI target. Okay, so in Windows, iSCSI is an optional service on Windows 10 or Windows 11. So if you invoke iSCSI by typing in iSCSI at the prompt and executing the iSCSI option that comes up, it'll say that it's not running, the service is required. So you go ahead and click Yes. After you click Yes, you'll go into this iSCSI Initiator Properties menu. In the target blank, type in the address of your NAS or wherever your iSCSI is being offered from. So after we enter that target, we click Quick Connect. Once we click Quick Connect, it should come up and say that it's connected, and it should be giving you the IQN. It discovers it on the network and connects. Then we can click Done, and now it looks just like the first block, except now we have the IQN filled in and it is connected. So now we want to go into computer management on Windows, and we want to go into disk management. Here I have disk 0, which is an internal NVMe drive. I have disk 1, which is a removable drive. And I have this disk 2 that's now showing up, which is our iSCSI LUN that's been mapped. And we have this little red arrow here because basically it hasn't been initialized. So it says it's unallocated space and not been initialized. If you right-click on that disk, you want to select Initialize Disk, which will write a signature to the disk. So the Initialize Disk option asks you if you want an MBR or a GPT partition table. We're going to give it a GPT partition table. That's a discussion for another video. Once that's the case, we're going to right-click again and say we want to create a new simple volume. We're going to click Next in the volume wizard. I'm going to allocate all the space. We click Next again. Assign drive letter F, that's fine. We click Next again. I say format this as NTFS, that's fine. We click Next again. There's a summary of what we want to do. We click Finish. I didn't show you in the screenshot earlier, but I went ahead and created the label iSCSI so that it would be clear to me, because as you can see, you can't really tell in disk management which drives are physical drives inside your machine and which drive is an iSCSI drive. But now we have a 2 terabyte NTFS drive that is actually an iSCSI drive connected to Windows. So what does the iSCSI initiator on the Ubuntu desktop look like? Well, first of all, we have to install the iSCSI protocol. So open a terminal and do a sudo apt install open-iscsi. Then you want to query the target, and you're going to do a sudo iscsiadm command as follows here. It's going to go down and parse, and in my case, it's going to find lots of addresses for my NAS because it has multiple NICs. So after discovery, you want to execute this command, sudo iscsiadm-m node-o show, and you're going to get the IQN, the target IQN, which is the iSCSI qualified name. That's the target from the output listing or from the QNAP iSCSI and fiber channel application. You want to edit the initiator name file by going into sudo nano /etc /iscsi /initiator name.iscsi. You want to include the initiator name and save the file, and log into the target with a sudo iscsiadm-m node --login. Okay, so what does this look like? So we go back to the iSCSI and fiber channel application on the NAS. I say that I'm going to modify the target, but I'm not really. I go ahead and copy this IQN here, and then I'm going to do a cancel. So then I go into sudo nano /etc /iscsi /initiator name.iscsi, and I enter this IQN, which is the second line. The first line was an existing iSCSI drive that I had connected on this particular host. So I'm adding a second iSCSI drive that we just created. Then I want to connect to the target. So after my editing session, I do a sudo iscsiadm-m node --login. You'll get several lines out, but the ones that we're interested in are the last two that say it's successful. It's actually successful at connecting at two different addresses. This 238 address is actually an address for a NIC that's connected to my network, but it's not yet configured because this is a lab machine. So we're now connected, and it says it's successful. So how do we access the iSCSI drive? Well, one thing we can do is in Ubuntu, we can go into the disks application. Here you can see this particular host has a 2 terabyte internal NVMe drive. It has an 8 terabyte spinning drive. It has a multiple card reader, which doesn't happen to have anything in it, but it's listed in disks. It has my 1.3 terabyte disk drive, which is actually at my first QNAP NAS, the first line of that file that you saw. And then the second line here lists as a 2.2 terabyte hard drive, and that's the second one that we created. Now, you might wonder why it's 2.2 terabytes. It all matters in how the drive size was counted, what the block size is counted by. All right, so create a partition and format this thing. Well, I like to go into gparted. Gparted is the graphical version of the parted application. Go under the device pull-down menu, select Create Partition Table. When you get the Create Partition Table option, just like we had in Windows, we have an option to create an MS-DOS partition table or a GUID partition table. I opt for a GUID partition table again, like I did in Windows. And then we have the option to create a new partition. I'm going to create the partition name as iscsi-vmsfog because that'll help me self-document it. And I allocated the full space for the drive like I did in Windows. So then we have our drive, and it was formatted ext4, 2 terabytes, and there it's available. So we want to mount the iSCSI drive at boot time. So we have to go get the UUID. So you can go into the gparted, get information about the partition, and the UUID will be listed. Make a note of this or copy that string. Then we want to create a mount point. So we go over to the MNT directory. We go ahead and create a directory. In my case, iscsi-vmsfog. You can, by default, that'll be owned by root. You can make it owned by whatever user you want. Then you edit the fstab file. So the last entry in the fstab file is UUID equals that UUID that I got /mount /iscsi-vmsfog. It's an ext4 drive, and underbar net dev says that this is a network device being connected to by iSCSI. So once we reboot, our iSCSI drive would be automatically mounted. So things to know. You can connect to more than one client computer to a single iSCSI drive. So unless you're using an app that supports file sharing, file locking, or clustering, files can be and will be corrupted. So be careful. Linux can access NTFS formatted iSCSI drives, but Windows will just offer to format those drives for you, so be aware of what you're doing. If you have an iSCSI drive that you want to be accessed by Windows and accessed by Linux, then format it NTFS. And QNAP File Station cannot see inside of iSCSI LUNs. So, in summary, we created an iSCSI target LUN on a QNAP NAS and demonstrated how to connect to it from both Windows and Ubuntu. iSCSI is a high-performance, block-oriented file system that can provide network-based storage for your desktops or servers, and it looks very much like an internal hard drive. QNAP iSCSI LUNs can be created inside of a file or as a dedicated LUN, and we created it as a dedicated LUN in our example. And iSCSI LUNs appear to the host operating system just like hardware drives. And iSCSI helps present storage where it is needed in the home lab. So if you're dealing with a desktop or laptop computer that doesn't have the option to expand its storage, you can always use iSCSI to expand its storage. Anyway, that's it for today, and thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and we'll see you next time.